So let's take a look at deploying the NanoLog streaming service for Zscaler Internet Access to stream the logs from my web traffic for Zscaler Internet Access to my syslog server. So we'll go to Administration, NanoLog Streaming Service, and we'll add an NSS server. In this case, we'll give it a name, NSS Web, and we'll click Save. We can click Activate, and then what we can do is we can download the enrollment certificates. And at this point now I can deploy the NSS server, and I'll select whether or not I'm doing NSS for firewall or web logs, and it will provide me with the sizing. So if I have 100 users and 100 transactions per hour, which is incredibly low, we're deploying it in VMware, and it'll compute and it'll give me the spec of the NSS server to download. I could click download and download it, but I already have it downloaded, so we won't worry about that. It's worth understanding that there's different sizing for web logs and firewall logs. And if I was to want to also stream my firewall logs, I would add another NSS server specifically for those logs as well. So at this point, I can come across to my ESX server, I can register a VM, I can deploy the OVA file, I click Next. I will call this WG for Welsh Geek, NSS Web, and then we will select the file here, the OVA file I downloaded previously. I'll click Next, we'll store it on data store 1, Next, Next, Finish, and let it deploy. We sit down here and we'll see that the OVA file gets uploaded. The file is about 1 gig in size, so it'll take a little bit of time to upload, and then it'll deploy and get instantiated. So the VM is deployed here, and we'll see it starting up. And so the NSS is booted here, and we can log in, and we'll provide the configuration option. So we'll log in through the console here. So the NSS has booted, so we'll come onto the console, and we'll log in, CS root, and we'll go sudo NSS configure. So it'll want a name server, so 192.168.1.2. We need to give a management interface IP address, 192.168.1.210/24. Default router is 192.168.1.254. And then the service interface is separate, so we'll configure this 192.168.1.211/24 with the same gateway, 192.168.1.254, and we're up and running. So I can come across and open my terminal window. I should be able to SSH CS root at 192.168.1.210. Okay, so at this point I need to transfer across configuration certificates. We'll exit out of this. So we'll SCP from the downloads folder the certificates, which is called NSS certificate.zip, NSS certificate.zip to root at 192.168.1.210:/TMP. Copy the file across as ZS root. So we can exit this, and now what we need to do is copy across the NSS certificate. So we SCP from the downloads folder the NSS certificate to ZS root at 192.168.1.210:/TMP. ZS root, and now we can SSH back onto it, and we can install those certificates. So sudo NSS install cert, and it's from /TMP, and it's called NSS certificate.zip. So we're all up and running now, and we can do sudo install sudo NSS update now, and it'll go off and it'll download its build and control itself and connect to the cloud and enroll to start the streaming. Whilst the build is downloading, I'll come across to my cloud portal, and we can configure the feeds. So the feed is the configuration of the data that's going to be sent to my syslog server. So I'll say add an NSS feed, and the feed name is NSS web. It is the NSS web type, and the NSS server will be this one that we've just created. And now we're going to configure the SIM. So we can either configure by an IP address or an FQDN. So we'll give an IP address, which is 192.168.1.14, and the port in my case is 11,000, and it's going to unlimited rate, so we're not being concerned by how many logs or transactions per second my SIM can consume, because we're not going to be generating too much traffic. And we can either send web logs, tunnel logs, or alert data. So we're only interested at this point in web logs, and we have a standard format, which is the time, the login ID, the protocol, the URL, action, application name, application class. So we have a bunch of fields here which are customizable. We can configure what time zone the logs will be sent in and how to handle duplicate logs. And then I can filter the logs based on activity type. In this case, I'm going to send all logs, but I could say I only want to send allowed or blocked transactions, and if they're blocked for a reason, what reason they're blocked for. I could even only send logs for specific users or departments, specific locations, specific transaction types, and I can filter based on that if they're requests or responses, user agent types, protocol types, methods. So I have a lot of granularity on the types of logs if I only wanted to send, for example, my DLP transactions. Where they're going to, the security information, file type information, and here I have my data loss prevention rules as to which logs I'm going to send. So I could create multiple feeds with multiple filters and send those to different SIMs or different ports on the SIMs or with different log formats depending on that feed type and my use cases. So I can split traffic out and correlate them on the back end. So in this case, I'm going to send all my logs, NSS web logs, specifically with this format, and we'll click save. We'll click activate on this, and so when the SIM is up, it'll be able to send all of my logs into my SIM. Okay, so the NSS has downloaded and updated itself, so I can now do sudo NSS enable auto start, and then I can do sudo NSS start. At this point, the NanoLog streaming service is going to connect to the NanoLog. It's going to pull down its configuration of the log feeds of where it's supposed to send those logs to, and it'll start streaming those logs. So we can see that the NSS service is running with a process ID of 1706, and it's up and running. So if I now generate some traffic, my Zscaler client connector is running. So I can browse to news, and I could browse to 888.com, and I should get blocked. So I can come across to my syslog server here, hit IP config, and I can see that I'm on that 192.168.1.14, which is the IP address of the syslog server. Let's expand this window slightly, and we'll cat my LSS log file, which shows me those transactions. So here we can see the transaction types, we can see the URL, so this was Mark Ryan, this was Google. We could see, scroll up in here, here's the blocked transaction, my location information. We can see all of this traffic coming through. If we grep 888.com from lss.log, which is the block page, we can then see those transactions, that it was gambling. So I have my NanoLog streaming service coming into my syslog server, storing the logs here locally as a CSV file.